See ya. Well, I can't see you, but you can see me. Yeah, I'm out in my evening walk. I've gotten into a habit of going out walking after my work day. That's why I'm looking so svelte these days. Many of you know I used to be a fatso. I'm still a fatso, but not as much of a fatso as I was once a fatso. I want to address some stuff because I've been getting a lot of heat, and that's okay. I don't care. I've gotten a lot of heat in my life over things. I've always been an outsider. Even on the inside of a group, I'm an outsider. And one of the problems with that is you kind of develop, I don't want to say a thick skin, but you kind of develop a tendency to basically say, screw you, you're not going to like me no matter what I do, so I'm going to stick to my guns. And that's what I do. I stick to my guns. Sometimes that backfires on me because, quite frankly, I'll stick to my guns. Sometimes in the face of very strong evidence that I might be wrong. And it can take me a long time to change. So that's a bit of a problem, right? But that doesn't happen very often. So the other part of that is you don't want to get wrapped up in the sunk cost fallacy. If you're not familiar with the sunk cost fallacy, it tends to be something that's used to describe entrepreneurs, business owners, when they say, oh gosh, I spent so much time, invested so much money, invested so much effort, sweat equity, blood, sweat, and tears, all of that into this project that I can't quit now. Sometimes the best thing for that person to do would be to quit, take the hit, take the loss, and start over. And so we all can be guilty of that in our personal lives, especially when it comes to our socio-political, socio-cultural positions. And so we have to be careful, right? That's why we cannot exist in echo chambers. It's why we can't exist in small, closed-minded groups of individuals who cannot stand to have their values or their positions challenged. We need to surround ourselves with people who will push us out of our comfort zones, who will not work as fruitless sounding bells that only ring in enjoyment and praise of our positions and our views. So, sit down, strap yourselves in. This is about to get real touchy. And here's why. I believe, and for those people who I know who are in the public sector, law enforcement especially, who still have some modicum of respect for me, that number dwindles every day. I think I'm down to like 3 people in the law enforcement community that actually treat me with respect still, or even talk to me. But everybody in law enforcement, everybody in the public sector enjoys qualified immunity. And it needs to end. Qualified immunity is a made-up doctrine created by the courts. It's not law. You will not find qualified immunity codified anywhere in legislative bodies in their works, period. What you will find when it comes to qualified immunity is that there have been some legislative bodies that have stripped it from anybody in their state. Colorado, New Mexico. I know that Colorado and New Mexico for sure. There could be others. But qualified immunity needs to go away. The courts overstepped in the execution of creating qualified immunity, judicial immunity, prosecutorial immunity, and qualified immunity for mayors and city councils and school boards and school board presidents and every hired and appointed public official. All right? It's got to end. It's got to stop. Now, I don't care if you agree with that or disagree with that. It's just the fact. It just needs to end. Now, what about the title of this video? Last week, I've put out several videos. One that shows a Minnesota State Patrol officer with someone pulled over on the side of Highway 52 northbound lane near the on-ramp of Highway 52 and Olmsted County 1. That same officer, a matter of 3 or so miles later, after finishing their traffic stop, was clearly speeding without responding to an emergency, without having their lights on, without, which every agency in the state of Minnesota has, as at the very minimum, a procedural guideline that says if you are going to be driving as a law enforcement officer for this agency, unless you are responding to an actual emergency wherein your lights have to be activated and or sirens have to be activated, you are not allowed to violate the same traffic codes that you enforce on others. And that's what I saw the other day with the state patrol officer. I took a lot of heat for that. People from Minnesota, people from all over the country labeled me a commie, a Marxist, told me that cops and state troopers have the right to break those laws, have the right to break those laws. One guy argued that how else are you going to catch speeders if you can't speed up and catch them? Well, duh, but then you better have your lights on, you jackass, right? So last week, I also put up a video, last week or the week before, I put up a video of a Rochester Public Schools bus speeding. I gave the bus number and the school it was tied to, and I had people get mad at me, telling me, one of them, a bus driver, saying, as a bus driver, mind your own business. And then another bus driver chimed in and said, as a bus driver, he's right, mind your own business. It is my business, but that's for later. And then yesterday, same highway, Highway 52 North, going through Rochester, at about the same location, a Minnesota Department of Administration Fleet Services vehicle, clearly marked as such, clearly plated as a Minnesota state vehicle, flew up behind everybody. I was doing 65 into 65. This vehicle flew up out of nowhere, past everybody in the left-hand lane, in a 3-lane stretch of the highway, northbound, once again, and continued at that speed. So I turned on my camera, and yes, I accelerated to a pacing speed and kept a pacing distance and determined that I was remaining in about the same intervals behind this individual. And that individual was traveling at speeds upwards of 80 miles an hour, not only in a 65, but into a 60 mile an hour zone. I then shot video of myself interacting with this person. I took the phone off of its mount. I know, distracted driving, right? I drive better distracted than 98% of the people in Rochester drive completely focused, by the way. And I shot video of this person capturing their image. He then slowed down, and so I put my phone up and thought nothing more of it. He then sped back up and tried to pace me. So I took my phone out and began shooting video of him again. And then he came up, put his window down, and tried to interact with me as we were traveling down the highway, basically accusing me of being a criminal and justifying himself, saying that he didn't speed. It's hard to hear in the video, but it's out there. It's up as a short. And man, did I take heat for that too. And here's the problem, folks. Nobody's holding them accountable. Who's going to hold that bus driver accountable if it's not you? Who's going to hold that bus driver to the standard when they've got kids on their bus and they're speeding? They're exceeding the posted speed limit with children on the bus. We don't even have to talk about the moral and ethical situation that's involved there, where what kind of example is he setting for those children that he's transporting, right? I mean, honestly, what's the standard he's setting for them? Not to mention the safety issues, correct? Who's going to hold him accountable? Is the public school district going to hold him accountable? Is the bus management service going to hold him accountable? I mean, he felt comfortable to be doing it, which means he's gotten away with it before. I used to tell DUI arrests this all the time when I was working for the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office in the detention center. These people would come in, man, I'm telling you, I've never drove drunk before in my life. I've never done that before. Well, that's BS. You have to. I'm not saying nobody ever got caught on their first go. But what I am saying is that you did it before. You did it before and got away with it. So it emboldened you to continue to do it. But this time you got caught. The problem is with the public sector employees, public sector servants, be they elected, appointed, hired, assigned, whatever, they're emboldened because nobody holds them accountable. Nobody says anything. And when you are the person who does hold them accountable, when you are the person who calls them out for their bad behavior, everybody defends them. People on the left and the right. Because you're statist sheep. You believe that the state can do no wrong. You believe that the state is the power, and that whatever anybody who's employed by the state or takes a paycheck from the state does or says must be right. And that's why holding this person accountable in this video yesterday, while everybody, not everybody, but a few people said, well, you were speeding too. Yeah, I was. Because the example that jackass was setting was that it's okay for him, so it must be okay for me, right? And so when I point out that he was breaking the law, everybody jumps on me. And here's why we have to hold these people accountable. Qualified immunity. Qualified immunity. When they get caught violating your rights, when they get caught doing something that they shouldn't do, that is in direct conflict with their job performance, there's nobody there to hold them accountable. We've seen it time and time and time again. There's a video. Lackluster just put a video up the other day of a guy who caught a chief of police of a small township doing upwards of 110 to 115 miles an hour as he was blazing down the road. And then he got into a residential district and he slowed down to 40 in a 20. So the guy calls his township and they say there's nothing we can do about it. He's our chief of police. So then he calls the 911 dispatch. 911 dispatch basically tells him you need to stop before you get hurt. So he finally follows this guy to another municipality, pulls in behind him, and there's an officer from that municipality there, and he says, hey, this dude was breaking the law. I have it all on my dash cam. So that guy calls his chief of police, who comes out and then threatens this guy with citations because he admitted to speeding. And the guy finally said, and because he had the cojones to do it, and I applaud him for it, he said, you know what? Go ahead. You write him a citation, you write me a citation, and I'll see you in court. And as it shows, or so far, nothing shows that he's actually going to get the citation. But neither was the jackass chief of police from the other town. He hasn't been issued a citation and a summons for court yet either. Now, if I'm driving down the road at 110 miles an hour and I get reported, what's going to happen? They're going to dispatch somebody to come get me. And they're not going to say the other person was wrong for turning me in and try and intimidate them into not filing the report. They're going to say, thank you very much, good citizen. Thank you for doing what you did. We're going to go get this evil speeder. Now, should anybody be doing 110 on most highways around the United States? No. You want to know why? Because the state, the government's responsible for the roads. There's nothing they do well. I wouldn't want to drive 110 on a road that's built, managed, and maintained by anybody in government. But what they did to that guy was try to intimidate him into not holding this other dude accountable. And this is the only way we're going to get public accountability. Because until we can get qualified immunity destroyed, done away with, and we can get all the normie cons, and we can get all the back the blue at all cost people on both the left and the right and the middle to recognize that qualified immunity does not help officers. There's not a single officer who violates somebody's civil rights, constitutional rights, or commits a crime against an individual who goes, hey, I got qualified immunity if I do this, this, and this. That's not what happens. They just do it because there's impunity. Because they know no one's going to stop them. Because they know no one's going to hold them accountable. Because for the most part, when it comes to public servants, the only people that get held accountable are those that blow the whistle. It's those that speak out. So there's only one thing for us to do as citizens. Record every damn public servant you see. Record them. Get their names. Start a YouTube channel. Put it out on Rumble. Put it out on X. Put it out on Facebook. Put it out on whatever platform you use. Name names. Point out what they're doing wrong. Embarrass them. Make their lives so embarrassing that everybody recognizes who they are and rains so much hell in the proverbial sense, where they're not, like threatening them, but they're actually contacting their agencies, contacting their departments, their employers. No matter what it is. I don't care if it's the Internal Revenue Service. I don't care if it's your local property tax assessor's office. I don't care if it's your Minnesota Department of Administration Fleet Services people. They need to be embarrassed. Because it's the only accountability.
4 miles completed. Duration 1 hour 3 minutes 27 seconds. Current speed 3.3 miles per hour.
I'm not walking very fast.
Average speed 3.8 miles per hour. Total time 1 hour 35 minutes 7 seconds.
But what's going to happen is sooner or later, they're going to get sick of every single thing they do being put out in social media, being put out on video platforms, being put out where they're being called out. And sooner or later, they're going to have to respond to it. Like, folks, I lost my career because I put out videos talking about how much I hated what was happening in 2020 and 2021. I lost my career for that. And I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't break a single law. I didn't do anything to violate my agency's policy and procedure. I simply spoke out about what I believed and was convinced, as I have every constitutionally, not granted, but delineated right to do, and I lost my career over it. Yet there are people who worked for my agency during that time frame, and shortly before, in the case of one deputy, his name is Paul Wallachroth, he tased an individual who was just laying on his bunk and didn't want to get up. So he tased him. That guy was put on administrative leave and then allowed to retire with a freaking party. During the pandemic, when we were still essential workers and had to do training on our days off via Zoom, there's a deputy working for the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office right now. Still, his name is John Bondi. John Bondi, who was hired despite the fact that he had a domestic abuse charge and conviction in his past. Hired to work for the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office with a domestic abuse conviction in his past. During a training, got drunk and made a fool of himself. Got summoned in to Chief Deputy Brian Howard's office to talk about his drunken behavior while training, and he showed up for that under the influence. He drove to the meeting about his behavior while drinking, or under the influence of the very alcohol that led to his behavior the day before. You know what happened to him? He got a ride home. Yeah, he got a ride home. John Bondi, deputy, Olmsted County Sheriff's Office, got a ride home after drinking and showing up under the influence of alcohol for a meeting about his behavior while he was under the influence of alcohol. Who's going to hold these people accountable? No one. He got treatment. If he's an alcoholic, he should get some treatment. But if I got summoned into something and I showed up under the influence of alcohol, and it was with a law enforcement officer like that chief deputy, I wouldn't get a break. I'd get placed in cuffs and hauled in and booked for driving under the influence. But no, Chief Deputy Brian Howard drove John Bondi home. This is why we hold people accountable, folks. It's not because we can affect change. It's not because that somehow we're magically one of us by ourselves is all of a sudden going to bring down the entire system of cards, the house of cards. We're going to pull down the entire corrupt system if it's just one of us. But we can start to affect some change if you all pull your heads out of your rear ends and start affecting the change. You don't go anywhere when you're going to be dealing with public sector, public servants. You don't go anywhere without recording that. If they try to run you off, you're not allowed to record here. Show me why. Tell me why. Well, we have a policy. I don't care about your policy. This is for my protection, because that's what we hear all the time, right? It's for my protection. It's for my safety. We hear that constantly, especially from law enforcement. I'm going to ask you to step out of the car. It's for my safety. I'm going to ask you to put that phone down while I'm talking to you for my safety. I'm going to ask you to come back here and sit down on the bumper of my car for my safety. I'm going to ask you to sit down here and cross your legs on the side of the road for my safety. I'm going to ask you to back up, Mr. Bystander, by 20, 30, 40 feet or more for my safety. You walk into, a driver's license center, the DMV in some places. And we're going to have to ask you to not record. It's for the safety and privacy of the individuals in here. Post office, you can't record in here. It's for the safety and privacy of the individuals in here. Even though it's a direct violation of the post office's policy, poster 7, that says you can record there and that they cannot stop you. It's the same thing when you walk into a county courthouse. Well, the judge has said that you can't record in the courthouse. No, the judge's order pertains to the courtroom. The judge can't order me not to record in the courthouse or take pictures. Or how about this? Oh, you can't take video or pictures unless you're a member of the media, so we need to see some credentials. No, folks, it's time for you to wake up. It's time for you to start recording everything that you do or every interaction that you have or you see other people having with public sector employees, with public servants, and record it. And when they do asinine things, because let's be honest, the vast majority of people who work in the public sector do asinine things because that's the caliber of people that we hire these days. And that's fingers pointed at me. I did asinine things. I'm not proud of it. I said asinine stuff. I'm not proud of it. But I changed. Most of the people that remain, not all, but most of the people that remain aren't going to change because there's nobody on them putting pressure on them to change direction, to change their mind, to change their behavior. And quite frankly, it attracts low IQ people into the public sector across the board. Because, and I'm not there again, this is not all, because I have several very, very good friends who are teachers in public schools, who are some of the brightest people that I know, and they shine like beacons of hope and light in incredibly dark places because of their intelligence, because of how dedicated they are to truth, how dedicated they are to their position as public servant. But the vast majority of people aren't. If you don't believe me, go check out the Angry Vet. Watch how he's been treated by the Department of Veterans Administration, or the Veterans Affairs Administration, excuse me. Go watch his videos. See what they've done to him and why he started recording. And now that because he recorded, which he's allowed to do by their own policy, now they're trying to charge him with felony wiretapping for recording in person. This is why, folks, it's going to hurt. It's going to get uncomfortable. It's going to be painful. And you have to be prepared for that because no one else is going to hold any of these people accountable. No one's holding law enforcement accountable. No one's holding public sector people accountable. The only people that get held accountable these days are us, we the people. And whether people out walking. Hi there. Nobody's watching out for us. And the only way that we can watch out for ourselves and watch out for one another, watch out for we the people, is to start holding the public sector people accountable. That's it. Even if we never get them investigated, even if we never get them disciplined, if that's it, then we need to be willing to take the hit of our own embarrassment and even run the risk of maybe getting sick ourselves if we see somebody in the public sector in our vehicles speeding down the road, breaking the laws that we're not allowed to break, but they do with impunity. There's no justification for it. People will tell you there's no two-tier justice system here in the United States. Folks, there is. There is a two-tier justice system in the United States. If you go back, and I know a lot of my patriot friends hate me when I say this, but if you go all the way back to Marbury versus Madison, it's a pivotal Supreme Court decision in the early days of our republic. And it's a long story about what all happened there. But Marbury versus Madison, everybody quotes one sentence from Marbury versus Madison without thinking about the totality of what actually took place in Marbury versus Madison. They quote, "Any law that is repugnant to the Constitution of these United States, not the United States, these United States, any law repugnant to these United States is to the Constitution is no law." No law. That's the one line that everybody can quote from Marbury versus Madison. But what they don't know, what they don't recognize, or what they don't care to do is to dive into it and recognize that the Supreme Court, in one fell swoop, with Marbury versus Madison, granted themselves a power that they never were intended to have, which was the power of judicial review and judicial legislation. The courts were never intended to be a superior power in the United States, ever. That was never the intent of the Founding Fathers. Never the intent of the Founding Fathers. Jefferson makes that perfectly clear in writing after writing after writing after writing after writing. The forefathers of this republic always intended all three branches to be separate but equal in their power, which is why the Supreme Court does not have an enforcement arm. It's why all enforcement comes through the executive branches. And how does that tie into today? Here's how Marbury versus Madison ties in today. 200 and some years later, 200 years later, let's say, in 1982, the Supreme Court, and courts all over the United States, created the doctrine of qualified or implicit immunity. And they applied it to every single person in public service. Every judge, every prosecuting attorney, every janitor, every county councilor, every city councilor, every county commissioner, every single person who draws a paycheck on the backs of the taxpayers enjoys, they use this verbiage all the time, enjoys qualified immunity. And that's why we have to fight to remove qualified immunity, take that away from the court decisions in 82, but we also have to fight to hold these idiots who are out there flaunting their ability to be free from accountability in front of our faces on a daily basis. If you don't like how I do it, that's fine. But I like my way of doing it better than your way of doing nothing at all. So many of you whine and cry and complain that you don't recognize the America that you grew up in anymore. I don't understand. I don't get what happened. It's your fault. because all you do is whine and complain, but you don't do a damn thing. Nothing. I vote. That's your fault. The people that you vote for keep doing this crap to you. I voted for Donald Trump. Trump's a chump. He's part of the problem. Well, who are we going to vote for? Hillary or Biden? What happens if it's Gavin Newsom? What are we going to do then? It's because you're not willing to think. You're not willing to look around and say maybe where the vote matters is not at the national level, the federal level. It's at your local level. Maybe that's where you have to do it. And that's why whenever I'm having interaction with anybody who gets a paycheck from we the people, I'm going to record it. I'm going to record it. You don't have to like it. I'm going to record it. And I'm going to put it up on my media. And that's what you should be doing too. And until you're willing to start doing that, to start having the acuity and the awareness of these people on the streets, on the roads, on the sidewalks, in the public buildings, city council meetings, county commission meetings, school board meetings, until you're willing to show up, until you're willing to show up to these things and start holding them accountable and running the risk of getting ran off by the cops because you don't want to play by their rules, until you're willing to do that, I don't want to hear about how patriotic you are. I don't want to hear about how much you love the Republic. And until you're willing to stop voting for the Republicans or the Democrats because those are your only options, you're part of the problem. The Republicans, no matter who they nominate, aren't going to fix anything because they love the power balance that they have with the Democrats. The Democrats aren't going to fix anything because they love the power balance that they have with the Republicans. But my Donald's going to save us. No, he's not. All of you guys screaming and hollering, Donald Trump, Donald Trump. He's being railroaded. Yeah, he's being railroaded. It's part of the game. It's part of the game. You remember, he had all of you idiots chanting, lock her up, because he was going to go and he was going to imprison Hillary Clinton. And then he was going to drain the swamp. He was going to drain the swamp. He didn't drain anything. He actually put a higher wall at the end of the swamp and filled the swamp with more swamp creatures. It took his advice from swamp creatures. He endorsed swamp creatures. He endorsed Kevin McCarthy. He endorsed Lindsey Graham. I mean, come on. Because he's playing a role. So stop looking at who's president. Stop looking at who's going to be in the House or the Senate, and start looking at who's going to run for city council. Start looking at who's going to be on school board. Start looking at who's going to be in the county commission. Those are the positions of power that we need to be worried about. But until you realize that, until you stop focusing on how broken the system is and the fact that you can't do anything about it, and you actually start doing something about
5 miles completed. Duration 1 hour 20 minutes 59 seconds. Current speed 3.5 miles per hour. Average speed 3.7 miles per hour. Total time 1 hour 37 minutes 9 seconds.
I'm moving really slow tonight. I'm normally way over 4 miles an hour for an average. But anywho, change happens locally. Think local. Act local. Get people in who believe in nullification. Get people in who believe in the doctrine of interposition. Get people in who are willing to practice the political philosophy of the doctrine of the lesser magistrate. I can't see anybody's comments, by the way, because my phone's way out here and I'm walking, so I don't know what you all are saying. You could all be threatening to unfollow me and calling me a commie or calling me a fascist or whatever. I have no idea. Oh, I do see the bottom one from Sunshine. You've got it all figured out, huh? Got it more figured out than 98% of the people we know. Because all I hear is whining. Poor Donald. My poor state. Do something. Like I said, it starts by holding these bad actors in the public sector accountable. From the DMV to the Department of Health, to the Department of Transportation, to the Department of Public Safety, to the VA, to the post office, to everything. They get away with whatever they want to get away with because nobody has the balls to challenge them. And then change your city. Change your city council. Change your school board. Make those changes. And stop holding your nose and voting for the lesser of two evils. If those are your only options, then find one that's not evil. Write in Ron Paul, for the love of God. Because you're not going to win if you vote for the other two. So write in the one that at least represents you. Because I know most of you, if you actually knew anything about Ron Paul, if you actually knew something about Ron Paul, he represents you. And he's not a Republican. He ran as a Republican, but he's not a Republican. He's a Misesian libertarian. But he represents you. If you have to vote for president, write in somebody that represents you. And then take action locally, where it matters, where it's important, because it's important. And if you can't find somebody, this is mind-blowing. If you can't find somebody to do it your damn self. There's an old saying, if you see a problem, fix the problem. And that's what I've been working on. It's why I put in mile after mile after mile, hour after hour after hour, driving to places like Albert Lea, driving to places like Owatonna, driving to Rochester, driving into Preston, Minnesota. Now I'm going to my local city council meetings because I failed for a few years. Driving up to the St. Paul area, Minneapolis, driving up to places, going to rallies, going to events, going to school board meetings, going to county commission meetings, going to these places. I mean, I went to Mankato to help them. I went for a meeting, and then I went another week later to go to an actual school board meeting, to be there to support them. Folks, if you see a problem, be the solution to the problem. Take your damn smartphone with you everywhere you go. And every single time you interact with law enforcement, every single time you interact with somebody who gets a paycheck from the government, which is us, record it. And when you find someone that's doing good, applaud them. But when you find the ones that are lackadaisical or they're just plain bad or evil, call them out. Because you'll find the good ones on my channel too. That's the only way this changes. It's the only way we start getting accountability for people in the public sector. I've said my piece. I stand on my ground. You don't have to like it. You don't have to like me. You don't have to support me. You can disagree with me. I welcome disagreement. If you want to have the conversation, an actual conversation with me via email, mbrrpodcast@yahoo.com, or in the comments section. Chad, I'm working on getting you on. if you're still watching, I do want to bring you on and give you a chance to say your piece. If you want to have an actual conversation and not just go, that's not the way I think, so you're wrong. Give me logical reasons, then we can do that. But it needs to be consistent. I'm going to quote Martin Luther here. When the Catholic Church told Martin Luther that he needed to recant his position, calling out the Catholic Church for being wrong, and then they would spare his life, he said, "Here I stand. I can do no other. Here I stand. I can do no other. The rest is on you."